I think that a lot of times that white America thinks of black America as living in neighborhoods that are crime-ridden, dirty, dangerous, run down, poor schools, no grocery stores. And that's not who we are. That's what we endure.
It makes me personally proud that people are interested in the history of Nicodemus. It just fills my heart with joy because I want everybody to know about Nicodemus.
Here on the high plains of Kansas, in this little town called Nicodemus, and in this township, people could experience freedom. They could experience land ownership. They could experience being in a town where they could govern themselves and walk down the streets without feeling the prejudice and discrimination that they would feel in other places.
My goal in this series that we call Civil Conversations is to portray African Americans in a different light than I think a lot of Americans see us. So I'm traveling around the West and seeking out these places where black Americans have worked hard to achieve something and to portray their struggle, their success, and then what became of those efforts. So Nicodemus is one of those places, the first place I chose, just trying to tell these stories that aren't so generally well known.
Nicodemus is the only remaining all-black town and the oldest remaining all-black town west of the Mississippi. It represents basically the time in American history when the government was trying to achieve manifest destiny from seas to shining seas. And so it's the western expansion that Nicodemus fits into. And it was when African Americans had been emancipated in the very end of Reconstruction after the Civil War. And African Americans were seeking a place to call their own here in this country. And so homesteading really was the draw for African Americans coming into the West. The push really were the Jim Crow laws that were being instituted almost immediately after emancipation. But the catalysts were town speculators, people that believed they could create towns and get people to settle there. So they solicited people from the central bluegrass area of Kentucky and a few other states like Tennessee and a few from Mississippi. They got a piece of the American pie, so to speak, and they could govern themselves in their own all-black town, and they could participate in homesteading and the agrarian lifestyle and community that was afforded here in Kansas. And so they survived that first winter as a result of people in the area that had homesteaded. The Potawatomi as well as the Osage, both tribes claim they came to Nicodemus. It's documented in our history that it was the Osage that came and shared their game. So they survived that first year and dug in for the winter, so to speak, and they lived in dugouts.
I am a sixth-generation descendant of the first settlers that came to Nicodemus. My great-great-grandmother was Emma Williams, and the significance of the Williams family is when she got here, she was about 8.5 months pregnant, and so they got here in September of 1877, and she has the first baby born in Nicodemus, who was Henry, in October.
As time went on, the town began to really establish itself in this major business district, and in its heyday, which was about 1885, they had all kinds of businesses: hotels, livery companies, a bank, millinery shops, implement companies, doctors' offices. It was a thriving little community, typical of any western town at that time. Because they were soliciting the railroad, and there was 3 railroad companies that were looking to lay track through the area, they raised the bond money necessary, made sure the railroads got the land associated with building the railroad. But when they started to lay track, which was south and east of Nicodemus, the railroad turned to the west, about 4 miles south of Nicodemus, and went northwest. There was a little town that the railroad created about 4 miles west of Nicodemus called Bogue.
So I'm standing on the banks of the South Fork of the Solomon River. This is what created the south boundary of the township of Nicodemus. The town of Nicodemus is just north of here, and the town of Bogue is just west of here. And when the railroad came through in 1886, the town of Bogue didn't even exist. But the railroad decided to build the town of Bogue, which as the crow flies is probably 3 miles from Nicodemus. So they bypassed, a thriving town with a population of around 500 people in lieu of a town that didn't exist that the railroad built as a railroad town, and just bypassed Nicodemus. Many merchants literally picked up their buildings, moved them, disassembled them, or put them on flatbeds drawn by oxen and horses, moved them to Bogue and reestablished a business community in Bogue. And it just took the business life, the economic base totally out of Nicodemus, and really it sealed the fate of Nicodemus. And you just have to wonder why. Would they bypass an African American town to just to completely build another town from scratch?
As a result of the Great Depression and the dirty 30s with the Dust Bowl years, people continued to lose hope and leave, and have to leave because of survival. They needed to leave so they could find jobs elsewhere. The core of the people that settled in Nicodemus, that knew each other genealogically as well as geographically, were the bulk of the ones that stayed. And then the big catalyst that helped Nicodemus to continue to thrive and continue to be here even to this day was the Emancipation Celebration. They had the first one in August of 1878, and we've been having them ever since. And so that becomes the catalyst for people who have their roots here to come back. And so they're not only connecting with the community, they're connecting with the land and with the families. And that is what has caused Nicodemus to continue to grow and be here. In 1976, Nicodemus was designated as a National Historic Landmark District. And then in 1996, we were designated a unit of the National Park Service as Nicodemus National Historic Site. And it's been since then that we've been here, continuing to try to tell our story.
I definitely want people to realize how strong these ex-slaves were that came from Kentucky. I mean, these folks were just about 10, 11 years removed from slavery. I just try to imagine how they felt leaving the only place that they knew, coming clear across country to somewhere where they thought was going to be the land of milk and honey, but they stayed and they were determined and they persevered to make it work. And so I just want to impart that in people that come to visit. We've been here since 1877, so we have to stay here. We have to make it work. There's no, we can't quit. How can you quit? We're not going to quit on my watch. I'm not going to let Nicodemus down on my watch. So I want people to know that we're determined and we're going to be here.
I think that the lessons of Nicodemus, it's a lesson of just, very, very, very hard work to achieve, and the achievement being taken away. And that's a story that has happened again and again and again and again. It's been this series of, 2 steps forward, 1 step back. Sometimes it's been 2 steps forward, 2 or 3 steps back. So I want to portray that and help the country move away from just the destructive policies that really just so detrimental for the whole entire country, not just people who look like me.
We African American descendants represent the living reality of a dream that people had when they came out of slavery, and that was to really experience freedom. And so we epitomize that. We are the descendants of those who endured slavery, had a vision, and made it happen. We become the example for the nation of what African Americans did with their freedom.
You know, Black Americans are part of the fabric of this country. We always have been. We're not going away. It is just time that conversations about race include a truer and more complete narrative about the Black American experience, so that we can move conversations about race away from a meanness born of ignorance to conversations that are more civil and move the country forward.